here on ANC, the ABS-CBN News Channel.
Ipasa na po natin ang National Land Use Bill.
No less than the President in his first State of the Nation address pushed for the passage of the National Land Use Bill. A land use plan is a blueprint of a city or municipality. It is a guide for government to orderly dispose the land and classify these as for agriculture, residential, commercial, industrial, open space, or a reserved green area like forest lands, swampland, river, or lake. With this, a city or municipality is able to sustain and manage a growing population, provide shelter and feed its people, and adjust to the evolving environmental landscape and climate change. Several bills are pending in Congress to create a national land use policy. The question is, how soon can lawmakers pass the measure and finally provide a comprehensive guide map for using the Philippines' limited land and water resources?
With the growing population and the degradation of our environment, land use has become an increasingly important issue. Food production, human settlement, and identifying protected areas and industrial zones should be in the forefront of government plans. How will concerned sectors work with the government in ensuring that our land is put to good methodical use? Our question, what should government prioritize in land development, agriculture, residential, or industrial lands? You can join our discussion. Text us React space ANC space with your name, address, and message. Then send to 2331 for Globe, Touch Mobile, Bayan, and Sun subscribers, and 231 for Smart and Talk and Text subscribers. And send us your tweets at twitter.com/ANC alerts, and be a fan of Talkback with Tina Palma on Facebook. With us, Environment and Natural Resources Under Secretary Manuel Herochi. We also have, joining our discussion, is J.B. Garganera. He is the National Coordinator of the group Alianza Tigil Mina. You got that right, Tigil Mina. We also have lawyer Aison Garcia of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Now, or CLUP Now. We also have Dr. Andrea Zlangi. He is the National Resources Governance Chief Advisor of the German group GTZ, which has been advocating substantial land use. And we have Dr. Jaime Cura. He is he's the Chief Executive Officer of Creba Land. It's all gentlemen here. We were supposed to have the Akbayan party list representative, but she's very busy, but we hope to get her on the line. Okay, so maybe this is the first time people are hearing about national land use. Or even the bill. We've never heard about it until now when I started to read about it. Who can tell us about this pending bill, the land use bill? Yusek.
Thank you, Tina. What I can discuss now is the draft executive version of the bill that we are trying to propose, or the President is trying to certify as a priority bill. The bill basically contains there are current land use policies in different laws now. They're all incorporated into that bill. However, the conflicting policies or the conflicting areas of these policies are being addressed by the bill on how to settle conflicting uses. Then there is an introduction of the sustainable development, economic social development principles in land use planning. So that is a very substantive viewpoint that will be put in the land use policies.
In the National Land Use Bill or
Yes.
National. How? Why? How was it done before this National Land Use? The local government was doing their own land use plan, and other government agencies were.
Well, the
What was
land
the
use plan-
confusion that led to the creation of this National Land Use Bill?
The confusion is that in every laws that we have, agricultural, land reform, urban settlement, has their own principles and policies of land uses. Then the local government was asked to develop their local land use plan, using as much as possible also local viewpoint in the land uses, but also considering all existing land uses. But in all those policies, in the independent laws that we have a lot of conflicting. Who takes precedence over what use is not an issue in those bills. Now, this land use bill will have to settle this up as a people, because in the bill now is the extensive use of public consultation. People now must decide as a community what are the priority uses of lands based on principles that are being laid in and policies that are being laid in the bill.
Okay, you represent, is this the mining sector?
Well,
Or are you the community that wants to be a watchdog
well,
for the development of mining industries?
okay. Our alliance is a group of communities and organizations that is challenging the mining policy of the government. And this challenge was rooted because of the magic word that Yusek Hirochi used. There is a very significant amount of land conflicts. And I think the interesting part here is that one of the confusion that may have resulted from these conflicts is we have a very dated land classification, what you say, like 1930s, our land classification and
But
the original map.
in this National Land Use Bill that's being talked about, that is there and has not been even discussed, includes mining, the
Yes.
mining
because
area.
from what
As
I
one of the
understand, there are
special
four.
As one of the special
the Constitution
concerns.
talks about 4 land classifications. There are forests, agriculture, mineral reservations,
And aqua?
and
Protected
and
parks.
protected
Protected parks and
areas.
forests.
This does not include water resources.
They should be either under protected resources or under
They are
forests.
protected in forests.
And forests.
These are rivers.
yes, and the
yeah,
lakes,
okay.
especially if they're under forests.
Okay. So your group now, your interest as a legal arm of this coalition, is that how you are in
Yes.
this discussion?
We are in a campaign to help the passage of a national land use policy. This has been going on for almost 20 years already, because we see that there is a need for the government to exercise its role in rationalizing the use of land, because land has a social function. It's not just a commodity where you can buy from the market. It has an effect on the food security. It has an effect on the lives of other people, like the environment, the cultural connection with the land. So government has to step in and try to manage
Even
correctly.
if there are tracts of land owned by private individuals or corporations,
Regardless whether
regardless
it's private
of whether
or
it is
public,
private or it is public,
government has a
must
role
develop.
in regulating the use, and also in how to control land being degraded or being used for efficient uses, ma'am. So the concept of sustainable development has to come in, because we are not just using land for our own generation, but we should think also of what the future generation needs.
Yes.
Because we have limited.
So if I have 1,000 hectares of land and it's been idle for all of these years,
then government has
then
to step
government in
in.
this national land use law or bill can tell you to not even through agrarian reform, tell you that you must devote it for a particular kind of use?
Yes, ma'am. The government has that power to tell because under the land use policy bill, government and the people must decide on how to efficiently use our land. If there are idle lands or there are too much land concentrated on this particular sector, then government has to come in and try to be the regulator.
I have 10 hectares of land that used to be planted to rice or corn, but I want to make it into a residential with a golf course.
That is not...
Is that something that this National Land Use Bill can also regulate?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Even now, there are laws already that regulate it. The Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Act and the new law on agrarian reform, the CARPER, RA 9700, prohibits conversion, they call it conversion of irrigated and irrigable lands for
other uses,
non-agricultural uses, because the country needs more land for food and for agriculture.
That is precisely why we put that question out.
Correct.
What is the priority? And Dr. Andreas, how do you come into the picture of this discussion on land use? What is the interest of JTSED? As a German institution that's been here for about 30 years now.
Yeah, thanks. Well, our interest is support. We want to support the Philippine government in developing an appropriate land use policy. We have been assisting the DNR, but also other agencies, in analyzing land issues. For example, today you have about 25 up to 30 million people living in uplands. They occupy basically illegally forest lands. They're not supposed to actually stay in those areas. So you have a large settlement issue. You have many people who use up resources unsustainably. And we are trying to develop solutions together with our Philippine partners how to make land use sustainable, especially in the forest, but not only in the forest lands, also in the coastal areas, and trying to develop a system where land conversion, for example, or if you want to call it land conversion, or alternative land uses are regulated. For example, your golf course shouldn't be ruled out straight away, but there should be a regulation under what conditions you would be allowed to change from a rice paddy to a golf course. This has to be regulated.
Yeah, but you mentioned about 25 million people occupying illegally.
Up to 30 million, the EMB.
Up to 30 million.
Is estimating
these
today.
are tribes, these are...
no, they're regular upland developers, dwellers.
Actual dwellers.
Upland dwellers.
Actual dwellers. They're not indigenous peoples who...
No.
And these are not ancestral domain
Domains,
lands.
No.
This would be migrants mostly.
This is probably part of it. That number certainly contains a certain amount of indigenous families.
Yep.
But this is the overall estimation of the DNR.
Okay. And these areas that they occupy are not privately owned, or these are declared as government?
Forest
lands. It's
Forest
government
land, therefore belongs to
the government.
to the state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so they just very freely occupy it and think that the government will not charge them for anything.
Well, people have to live somewhere.
Yeah?
Yep. These are
And,
people who are marginalized down there, and they have to go up.
If you look at their income situation, a few of them are making more than $1 a day.
Yes. Okay, so we got everyone's expertise before the public, so they know exactly what we're talking about. And of course, Dr. Cura is with CREBA. This is the Chamber of Real Estate
and Builders Association.
and Builders Association, and you represent the private sector?
Yep.
It's a private organization.
It's a
Trevor.
private organization representing the interest of real estate,
Yes.
the real estate sector.
But my presence here is on behalf of CREBA Land,
Yes.
which is a private company that was put up by CREBA and other investors to address the problem of title verification and the problem of the lack of technical systems to hasten the process of identifying parcels of land all over the country.
And whose job is that? That's the Land Registration Authority?
It is supposed to be the job of
Why do you say
government
supposed to
agencies.
be?
Well,
They're not doing their job, is that what you say?
well, by their own admission, no? They wish they could have done it a little faster, but you know, the progress of the country requires a faster pace of planning the proper use of land, the best use of land, and then making these parcels of land that may be used for certain purposes more easily available to sectors that are prepared to invest in these properties and develop them according to the intended purpose.
So at what stage is Creba Land into now?
Well,
what has it done so far?
In the past 4 years, we have
Yes.
developed a whole GIS or Geographic Information System backbone, okay, which will enable, for example, local governments or institutions like banks that hold in their portfolio thousands of land titles to be able to track where these parcels of land exactly are located, because that's one of the difficulties right now.
Yeah.
While all of us subscribe to the noble purpose, no, of making sure land is equitably distributed, that every Filipino family is able to to access land and build a home and other requirements on that piece of land, it is easier said than done. While all of us want farmers, for example, to have their cloas, where exactly are these parcels of
So,
land?
okay, how do you begin? How does one begin the equitable distribution of land to all of the sectors or all of the industries that need land to be able to have food security, to be able to have enough forest, to be able for us to get within the limited timber license agreements, et cetera, et cetera. How do you explain to the people what is the rationale of this land use plan?
Well, the rationality of land allocation is basically based on our economic direction. Economic directions.
And economic directions change every time we have a new president.
So in effect, the basis of long-term economic direction is the basis for allocating lands. For example, population needs development, further development for urban sprawl or urban enlargement. Then in fact, in every updating period of that land use plan, which is a cycle of 5 years now, that should be considered in the amendments of the plan. Now, the allocation for agriculture also depends on the food needs and the security issue.
Was the comprehensive land use plan developed by local governments in the absence of a national land use and the presence of existing laws on land use? Is the present distribution of lands and utilization now, did it fall within
That
all of those previous laws or all of those existing laws?
No, you can see extremes.
Yeah. Where did it go wrong? If at all those laws did not actually suit the
Economic
forecast, the scenario that he talks about.
First,
Where did it go heavy on and where did it not develop?
well, first you can already see many agricultural lands being converted at the wrong places.
Because they forgot to do the computation for the expansion of population.
Not
to
only that,
Hindi yun.
Not only that, ma'am.
Agriculture being converted to residential.
Residential.
And industrial.
Industrial.
Because they fail also to get the sentiments of the people. In a national land use bill that we are proposing, and which is in fact filed already, HB 478, House Bill 478, there's a bottom-up approach where you ask the community what they need, you assess from the grounds what is really needed by the community, and then you gather all of this data and then bring it up. Now,
Is that, I mean, it's a nice way of putting it. It's a bottom-up. But is that practical?
Well,
if you were government and you were maybe the governor of that particular province, and there is a project that's going to be funded, like an ethanol project somewhere in the province, and you're going to bring it down to the lowest to the lowest level of local government, and of course they don't like to have an ethanol because there are environmental concerns. I don't know if that is a problem. No, I'm just using it as an example blindly.
Yes.
Is that going to make things better for the implementation of a land use plan?
Yes, it will make things better.
How
ma'am,
do you
because,
see that? Let's say
yeah.
it's mining. Let's use as an example mining. Okay, some mining, Australia or China is going to come in and say they want to develop, they want to put up a mining operation
project,
here. And you want to go to the barangays and you're going to talk about it, they're going to open it. No, because they're going to have environmental problems. Look at the incidents of these other areas. So, paano yun? How do you include that now?
If we're going to look at the laws, the mining law would be the first reference, and then the local government code, and then there are other laws. But I think the final decision whether land can be used and opened up for mining operations will have to rest on several factors. Number one, and I think the basic one is that land declared as a mineral reservation. And there are very few land. Second is that land under any current use. And if the current use
use other than mining.
Other than mining, because it only becomes a mining area if it's declared as a mineral reservation, or if a mining contract is finally signed. But if the current use is agriculture or tourism or settlements, then there has to be a negotiation from the local government units. Now, the problem is doubled when you have indigenous peoples and ancestral domains.
But they have a law now
Well,
that have
I think,
determined the areas that they actually...
Ma'am, you did ask, is it a practical implementation?
Yes,
in the Philippines, we have a lot of good laws. Now, I think the problem now is with the implementation.
And what is good with this new law, with this
proposed
bill, is that kind of issue of what are the criteria for mining is already there. That principle is already well laid in that current bill. And in the old laws, it is really a conflicting interest.
There's no
and there is no harmonizing process.
Okay. So, yes, very quickly. May I just read the comments and let's see how people are understanding our first part of the program. From Mirna of Rizal, the government should develop residential areas first instead of prioritizing industrial areas. We need homes first, then jobs. From Manong Ben of Isabela, dapat sabay na tugunan ng pansin ng gobyerno ang agriculture at residential development para kaming mga farmers may source na ng kabuhayan, may sarili pa kaming lupa na pwedeng tirahan. From Lloyd of Cavite, yung mga malalawak, Andreas, I'm sure you've been here for a long time, so you know what we're talking about. Malawak na taniman, huwag naman sanang gawing golf course. Kawawa naman yung mawawala ng kabuhayan. From Dr. Eric, USEC, please address quarter problem by repealing Lina law. This will solve half of our problems already. More about this discussion. I think you're beginning to understand what we're trying to talk about here. It is a very important issue now. Because if this law is if this bill is passed, does that assure those who are homeless will get a crack at a piece of land and will have a house? I mean, you'll answer that. When we return, you're watching Talkback. Is that going to be the bill? Welcome back to Talk Back. We asked our friends in our social media accounts, how should government and NGOs work together to ensure land is put to good use? On Facebook, or Mok CPM says, NGOs could help the government review or implement development plans or zoning ordinances. Meanwhile, Sheila De La Torre believes government, NGOs, and private stakeholders must determine what is the most equitable and efficient way of using land. She says putting land to good use would entail a comprehensive framework where costs and benefits shall be weighed. We also asked people in the streets on what they thought about the subject of land use. Here's what they had to say.
Kulang ang suporta ng ng gobyerno. Dapat tuunan ng pansin talaga ng gobyerno ang sektor ng agrikultura.
Hindi naman talaga na-redistribute sa farmers yung land nila kasi kino-convert ng mga may-ari ng lupa into industrial land. So ang point lang is parang even yung laws ay hindi ganoon ka-strict para ma-award talaga sa farmers yung mga lupa na sila naman talaga yung nag-toil for.
Okay, still with us, DENR Undersecretary Manuel Herochi, JB Garganera, National Coordinator of the group Alianza Tigil-Mina, Lawyer Ason Garcia of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Now, or CLUP Now, Dr. Andreas Lange, he's the National Resources Governance Chief Advisor of the German group GTZ, and we have Dr. Jaime Cura, Creba Land Chief Executive Officer. We want to find out now who will be the arbiter, because if you're talking about bottom-up, there's going to be a whole debate in the community, and this is very healthy to find out exactly how the people want their land to be used, okay? Who is going to now determine in instances where land in a particular area is owned by one person who happens to be the governor or the mayor
Of the town.
or a congressman or a powerful person, a landed person? How do you see that shaping out in the discussions?
Well, in our constitution, of course, the public's participation should first be prioritized. In this current proposal, we are proposing a council composed of executive offices whose jurisdiction over land, like the DNR or the DAR or the DA, and civil society representatives from the 4 basic sectors who are using the land, like the farmers, the indigenous people, the urban or the urban dwellers, and then the fisher folk.
But Ma'am Tina, I think we should clarify that this law I don't think it will touch on the ownership of the land.
Not.
But it will clarify the use of the land. So ownership of the land, that's going to be arbitrary, ownership of land. But that land being owned by someone has to be classified by the local government on what's the most appropriate use. Is that going to be for residential? Is that going to be for industrial? Or is that going to be protected?
And the use will be have to be followed by the owner?
Yes.
Yes. For example, so if you're an owner and that land is identified as agriculture, you do not have an arbitrary right to convert it to other uses. Because according to that land use plan of the town, that area, that piece of land was reserved for agriculture.
And will remain for agriculture use forever and ever and
until
ever.
the land use plan. No, until the land use plan is updated.
The local government reclassifies the land.
Revise it.
How convenient.
Yes.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, Tina, just to spice up this conversation some more.
Don't spice up in what way, sir.
There are people who say that we may not really need a national land use act. What we may really need is a land use code. Because there have been, over the years,
many
different pieces of law and legislation that have been passed defining specific uses of specific types of land. For example, the local government code has enshrined in the local government the right and the obligation to classify the use of the various uses of land within their territory. And that makes sense because they are the ones closest to the territory and jurisdiction of their community. Now, the planning is supposed to be participatory. Now, granted, some local governments have not been able to do this job the way it should be. The thing, therefore, to do is to help them, for national government to give them the support that is required. Now,
what is the support?
Training, for example, on how to do the planning correctly, but also number two, technically.
Databases.
You know, from the time these laws were passed, technology has developed so much. There is now technology available that will help hasten the identification of geographic boundaries between towns and cities, the specific, the current use of land, and the amount of land that's still available.
Okay, Dr. Andreas, I don't know if we should use Germany as an example. Does Germany have a national land use
Law.
act or law?
Well, Germany has a very sophisticated way of planning. We have very strong zoning. We make sure that land is really used for the purpose that is the designated purpose.
And what
it's
was the
strictly
principle
enforced.
involved? How did it determine whether these areas will be purely for agriculture, this will be for residential, this will be for mining, and this will be for other uses?
Of course, you have all kind of different problems that you have to consider. One is ecological. You cannot raise a city in a watershed because then you will run out of water.
Of course, that in the mapping that you're talking about, there's a geohazard mapping as well that goes into that database.
You probably don't want your multi-billion-dollar bridge on a fault line, for example. So there are a lot of, let's say, ecological or geological consideration first, but then you have social considerations. Where do the people live? Give you one example, going back to the Philippines. LGUs here do not only plan for the land under their jurisdiction, but they're also supposed to plan for the forest lands that is within their boundaries. That's how the local government code is spelling it out. But the forest land is not under their jurisdiction, but it's government land. It's either DNR or you also have ancestral land. You have LGUs. Actually, there's LGUs who have 3 different types of lands, and only one is under their jurisdiction. You have LGU land, you have DNR land, which is the forest land, and you have ancestral domain, which is under the Indigenous People Commission.
And under this bill, all of this is integrated into one plan.
And now this is exactly the task, how you bring planning for these 3 important types of lands together into one legislation, into one piece of law, and into one coherent structure, institutional structure that is behind.
If we see that there are discordant plans of the local government, will you retool and give them a new plan? Well, I mean, will they come and start showing what kind of comprehensive land use plan Laguna, Batangas, Quezon, Isabela will have, and will show it on the table? And after this bill is passed into law, you will now redefine it for them?
Actually,
the committee.
I want to talk to the lawyer. Can that be done?
Well, we have to amend some of the laws that are already in
Hindi,
place.
let's say, ginawa na ng Laguna yung plano nila. Comprehensive land use, may zoning na sila. And NEDA, I'm sure, did NEDA have to agree on the design, on the land use?
That's the rule
right
of the
now,
committee.
yes, it has to go through NEDA. But
when this bill is passed into law, pwedeng ibahin yun?
Yes. They have to undergo again the process.
Planning process.
Planning. And because the other laws, other interests are not in the current plan. Like the interest on disaster, the interest on food security, and all the other interests, the settlement interest, should be in place in this plan. So they have to improve it, and then have to undergo participatory process, because many of these plans were done on a table survey. They call it table survey, and they have not actually consulted the people on what's the best plan that
But
should
the
be
people
done
you consult in areas, especially the ones that have become dormitories and have resided in these nearby towns, they're not locals. I mean, they're there. They're new people who just maybe lived in some areas and are now in an area closer to their workplace because there are industrial zones there. And you want them as well to be part of the discussion. Everyone who is a resident or he is a transient, who is a business man in the area, kasali lahat sila dun sa debate.
Ideally, the planning process should include as many stakeholders
as
possible.
As wider as possible.
And who determines what the final shape of that plan is? They vote? Does it go into a referendum? What
Council.
happens?
No, it's really
Under the LGU, the Local Government Code, then there would be an open hearing, a debate, and it will be voted upon by the Sanggunian.
Sanggunian. And that is submitted to NEDA.
And then it will
There
be
is still a
provincial.
provincial.
Oh yes, the provincial.
There is a provincial.
HLURB, and then
We'll review.
That's the current.
That's
With
the current, yes.
In the bill, it is now the committee that was created for that.
For example,
that will do the reviewing process.
If you're talking
And,
of a
and
town,
HLURB is part
Part
of
of
that
it.
committee.
Committee.
How
And
many in
NEDA,
the
of course.
committee?
I think there are around
18, sir.
yes, that's
Yes.
correct. The number
18 from all
18.
over the country, or just on the
at
on
the
the
national,
departments?
in all
At
levels,
national level.
in all levels, national, provincial, and even on the municipal level, but which is the council already. So there are hierarchy of committees, and all the review process happens in all these committees. So whatever is conflict that is happening is settled at every level. At the end of the day, the national will settle all the conflicts that happens on a national scale.
Are you confident that the national can settle all of these local
We are
conflicts?
confident at the provincial level that is already settled, because the top to bottom is not totally top to bottom. There is that policy that filters down first, that guides the process.
And how do you actually convert the voices of the people into this whole debate? They vote on it?
It is the council,
or
the
you get a
Sanggunian Bayan.
sense,
The Sanggunian
and then
Bayan.
like puts the imprimatur on the discussion.
Yes.
but Ma'am Tina, during the formulation of the plans,
Political rin ito.
Yeah,
This is
yes,
a very
correct.
highly political
Yes.
exercise.
Yes.
But you can do
It's
it.
a
It's
democratic
possible.
exercise.
That's what I'm saying. People
Yeah.
always decide.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Political.
people decide.
And it's good? And
It's
it's good?
it depends on the local chief executive. I mean, we do have experiences with local
But the
chief
experience
executives.
with Germany has a very strong process on that. Public hearing, where the community and the council member who is assigned for that community hears the
Party
people.
list sila eh. All parties. eh.
We have had actually an experience in
And
this
they're
country.
listened to.
As early as the late 70s, the city of Davao conducted what they called an integrated area development planning process. For a whole year, all the different sectors were involved.
And have they followed it?
Well, they produced a 5 development scenarios for the city of Davao
Yes.
as the basis for a master plan.
And where are they?
Well,
Did
we
they
don't
follow
know.
any one of those?
Because at the end of the day,
hopefully they
at the end
voted
of the
today.
day, the
Duterte
political
came in.
leadership is critical here.
So that's why they have to perpetuate themselves.
Not really. Talking about the updating of the plans, for example, you referred to Laguna. They already have a plan and so on and so forth. You don't even need a National Land Use Act, a new one, to get them to review the plan, because right now they are obliged. As a matter of fact, the current situation is all local governments must update their
Yeah.
comprehensive land use plans
Every 5 years.
every 5 years. Now,
And that is done by the current
Process.
But
there
done by
is a
the
process
LGUs.
there,
Yes.
but the mayor can actually change it, or the provincial governor, depending on who sits there. So every 3 years lang ang term nila eh. So if every 3 years bago yung local official mo, pwede niyang ibahin yun.
This is
well,
why
through the democratic process.
To the
Yes,
democratic process, yes, but they can just overturn. And
But
if you have
this-
the entire sangguniang
Under your control.
under your control, I mean, what Tina Palma did during her incumbency is just going to be overthrown when Hirochi comes into power.
But I think this would be the beauty of a national legislation. That
So
you
nothing
tighten the
will
screws.
move.
No, it would rather mean that you enforce an existing land use for certain areas
Where there is a conflict
beneficial,
like this that I
is
used as an
beneficial.
example.
Yes.
Let's assume that the land use actually in many land use plan is really beneficial to the community, but in many instances it is simply not enforced. So having a new legislation, having a proper regulatory process in place, which would allow LGUs and also national government agencies to enforce.
What if the plan of the LGU, the master plan of the LGU, does not conform?
It doesn't have to conform.
Or it has a lip service
Like I said,
conformity.
Let me share you
a
one
lip
ex-
service.
the review process instituted in that bill can basically demand from the local government to revise the plan. if there are conflicts that happens.
Okay. More interesting insights from our viewers. Hold on. I know you have a lot of things to say. From Jum Santos of Zamboanga, ban logging, stop mining, plant mangroves, and stop commercialization of the agricultural lands. From Leah Pruna of Paniki, that's in Tarlac, balanced and proportionate distribution of land is one of the solution of the problem. From Dennis Calvan of Katipunan, the government should prioritize agricultural lands and provide support to make these lands productive. From Edgar of Nueva Ecija, you have so much land in Nueva Ecija. Ang mga may-ari ng bukid na pipilitan ibenta ang kanilang mga lupa para maging residential dahil wala nang supply ng patubig. Namamatay lang ang pananim. You understand that, Doctor? Mas malaki ang gastos kaysa kinikita, hindi sinusuportahan ng gobyerno ang magsasaka. Kaya naman pala, wala pa lang silang patubig. Okay, a lot of other things that you will bring up in the last round. You'll have your time. Final stretch of talk back in a moment. Stay with us, please.
Mga germs! Magkala tayo ng sakit! Nasakop na natin ang dumi sa mga ilalim ng leeg! Ano yan? Napakalapot! Tinatanggal ang dumi natin at pinapatay tayo mga germs! Ah! New Domex Ultra Thick Bleach. Patay ang lahat ng kilalang germs.
Sabi niya, bibigyan niya daw po ako ng biskwit ng pagkaabot na sa akin. Bigyan niya na po ko hinila. Doon niya na po ko inabuso. Paggabi naman po, pinapanood niya po ako ng bold. Ginagaya rin po namin yun. Pag di po ako sumunod, papatayin niya po daw ako.
Walang ngipin ang komisyon. Sabi nga nila, pagkahaba-haba man daw ng prosesyon, hahantong at hahantong pa rin po ito sa The Bottom Line.
Well, I will take this one over any Congress interview every day.
It was fun.
Pinagpapawisan ako kahit malamig.
This is one of the toughest. Pati ako na may mesmerize niyan si Boy Abunda.
The Bottom Line with Boy Abunda.
Para siyang hot seat, pero nang naglaon, naging cold seat naman siya.
I'm Gang Badoy. I started Rock Ed Philippines. What made me decide to join the Brew? It's almost like you're a rock fan and then all of a sudden the rock star says, come to the backstage with me. How can I say no to that?
Hindi rin kasalanan ng government yung problema kasi inherent dito yung devolution ng agriculture sector. Ang dami-daming problema na kailangan pagtuunan ng pansin, not in a uniform manner kasi iba-iba sila ng problema.
I think the agricultural policy in the Philippines is okay in terms of the attempts to distribute agrarian reform. The policy itself is okay, but the implementation is not.
Welcome back. Our question, what should government prioritize in land use development, agriculture, residential, or industrial lands? And you saw a sample of how our viewers felt about what the priorities should be. We have the last round, and it's just about 9 minutes, so we need to take your own perspective. We start off with you, Dr. Cura. Where do you see this land use bill? How do you see this land use bill shaping the proper utilization of land eventually? You think it's going to be beneficial, given the culture and the way our ordinary citizen thinks about land, because they don't have land?
Well, like I said earlier, some of us tend to think that it's not a National Land Use Act that we need.
Mhm.
It's really a National Land Use Code. In order to codify
Does the code have
and reconcile the various laws that have been passed.
Does the code have the force of a law?
Of course. The labor code has the force of law.
Collects.
But what it will do is get all the various pieces of legislation already in place, come together, and reconcile them, coordinate, and remove the areas of conflict. Who is in the best place to determine, after all, how a piece of land or a territory can be planned for the use of its community? It's the local government, isn't it?
But there are emotional entanglements in these debates.
There will always be emotional entanglements when you talk about resources that are basic needs of people.
Yes,
All right.
or even
but who is in
tradition,
the best,
tradition and
but who is in the best
culture.
position? Who is in the best position to talk about this with the people and to represent the people? Is it the national government or is it the local government that's closest to the situation?
You're talking of the Cordillera area, and this place has remained verdant. I hope. I hope.
I hope.
I hope. Am I speaking?
It's not.
It's not. The forest lands. This is a place where I think that has forest land still. And is this the area, Dr. Andreas, where you see people occupying a lot of these forest lands?
Yeah, you see it all over the place. I was going to say, even if you don't own land, you benefit from a good land use. Because, for example, for the population lives in forest, if they can avail of certain user rights, for example, that is clearly regulating how they can live in the forest.
User rights. Stay in that
doesn't mean they
land.
own the land, but they get a certain user right, let's say for 25 years. The DNR actually has such policies and agreements in place, and we believe they're rather successful because people really get to use natural resources in a way that is sustainable because they have security. I think the whole discussion about land use policy is about security, securing how land is used, enforcing it, regulating access, and making sure that even those who don't own land get benefit from land. Because if you cross a street, you still want this street is properly maintained, it's properly done. You want to use public transport, even if you don't own the public transport system, or if you don't own the land where the public transport is built on. So there's a lot of benefits for the public that is beyond land ownership, in fact.
So we're not anymore pushing for an individual to own land.
The land use
in the land use, it's not.
No,
we're not talking about
ownership,
giving them hope that someday they will own land and they will be able to build a house?
Well, of course, it would be important, especially for those who live in critical conditions, that there is something to offer. Especially, I said earlier, up to 30 million people really living in the uplands, totally unregulated. Of course, it would be good if this legislation could address their livelihood problems. But
Attorney.
Yes. I still think that we have to have a National Land Use Act. A code will not solve it, but we are just collecting all the laws, but not actually trying to put a way of rationalizing on how to use our land. We have limited land, and we have to secure not only our needs, but also the future needs. Food, settlement, and industrial use. Right now, there's an influx of market-oriented development, like setting up of economic zones from here, but there are no proven results. Like in Aurora, there's this economic zone, APECO, that is being set up on 12,000 hectares of land of indigenous peoples and irrigated lands and watershed lands. So how can you solve that with just your laws? If you look at the laws, it is clear that there's a moratorium on development on watershed, moratorium on conversion.
And how did this APECO come about?
It come about because there's a law that says that, well, we have to put an economic zone here. But the people were not consulted. The people are saying, no, we are already developing this area as productive as we can as rice.
Okay, in a practical example like that, in the national land use, that kind of a debate will be settled by the essence of this national land use
Yes,
act?
it will be settled because
and
there are...
and all of the committee members will now listen and talk to the people who are objecting to the formation of this APECO.
That venue would be
because there are special areas of concern.
You will rule in favor of the people?
It depends on what is the best use of the land. Right now, the people says that, this is very productive rice granary in this area. Why put...
And they'll have to show you the yield per hectare, and that's how it's going to be decided upon.
Yes.
And the committee can actually say, no, we think that there can be an economic zone here.
Yes.
That can be done. Okay, sir.
Well, I think the Land Use Act is timely and relevant, at least for two reasons. Number one, we are hopeful that land conflicts can be resolved. Specifically case on the mining issue. You have a priority of the government to revitalize the mining industry. But then you have local government units who are opposing it. And so you have a conflict between the national government and the local priorities. Taking off from Dr. Cura's hypothesis earlier, and who are in the best position to determine the use and management of the natural resources. Now, in the absence of a National Land Use Act, these kinds of conflicts will not go away and probably escalate. A second reason why we are seeing that the Land Use Act is not only timely but relevant is that, the mere collection and codification of laws might do that. I mean, try to harmonize. But it will not resolve the policy conflicts. And when you say policy conflicts, Secretary Rocha earlier said, what determines the use of the land? It's economic direction. But for us, that's a dangerous proposition. I mean, economics is an important factor, but then you also have social, political, cultural dimensions that you have to talk. And that's where the concept of sustainable development comes in.
We have barely a minute or 2 minutes for you.
Like I said, the best comment that we heard is from that viewer. The key word is balance. Balance ecologically, economically, socially, and culturally. It is the balanced land use allocation that is important. And the mechanism put in by this bill will ensure that balance. One, balance in the sense of the community, because community will be consulted. Balance in terms of science, because all sustainable development principles was already there. Balance in terms of economic, because economic needs of urban development, industrial development is already considered. Then balance socially, because the settlement growth is also considered. One principle that is most basically new in this aspect is the efficient use of land. When we talk in the Philippines of house, we talk of big land, lot. Now we should talk of efficient land use.
High rise.
We should talk
medium
about
rise at least.
We should medium rise. And so, and therefore the key word is balance.
Yeah, balance.
And that is what is needed.
We can also
in the
balance greed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you for joining us. Very interesting insights on the National Land Use Bill. Hopefully, this Congress will get to put it in the committee for some hearings here and there. Let's see if it passes. Of course, it was certified by President Noynoy as urgent. That's all the time we have. Talk to us again next week on Talkback.
When you choose ANC, the ABS-CBN News Channel, you're informed. You're ahead. You're empowered. ANC, the ABS-CBN News Channel, is the channel that most subscribers choose to be added on top of their basic Sky Cable package. To all our loyal viewers, thank you. ANC, the ABS-CBN News Channel.
It's the security it gives. The opportunity it creates. The efficiency it renders. The power it provides. Beyond the gadgets, let's look at the technology that helps create a future product. Every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Only here on ANC, the ABS-CBN News Channel.
Lining up stories to keep you informed.
Paris, France, for the country.
Covering events to make sense of them.
Paris, France, where if they make nothing.
Greeting you with colorful conversation. Getting ready to face the day ahead. Have a head start with me, Karen Davila. Weekdays, 8 in the morning, only here on ANC, the ABS-CBN News Channel.
Walang ngipin ang komensyon. Sabi nga nila, pagkahaba-haba man daw ng prosesyon, hahantong at hahantong pa rin po ito sa the bottom line.
Well, I will take this one over any Congress interview every day.
Pinagpapawisan ako kahit malamig.
This is one of the toughest. Pati ako na may mesmerize niyan si Boy Abunda.
The bottom line with Boy Abunda.
Para siyang hot seat. Pero, nang naglaon, naging cold seat naman siya.
I'm Pinky Webb.
And I'm Tony Velasquez.
This is Dateline Philippines.
I'm Gang Baday. I started Rock Ed Philippines. What made me decide to join the brew? It's almost like you're a rock fan and then all of a sudden the rock star says, come to the backstage with me. How can I say no to that?